What does it say here? Is going away later this year for quick. Hangouts on Air is going away. Huh. All right, that's good to know. I will have to find another solution for this. All right. One of the things with this product sense question, with Facebook, and what's interesting is that the key, most important thing to actually do this question well is not so much the structure of the question. It's not so much about following a structure. What is the key to do this is to actually think through, ask yourself why at every single step of the interview, and looking at the interviewer and getting cues as to what the interviewer is trying to gauge from you. In general, the interviewer is trying to understand why you are saying what you are saying, right? So when you start with answering a question in product sense, you need to start from the top, trying to first clarify your understanding of what you're being asked, okay, and put your answers within the context of that. And we're going to go through that, right? So if they ask you, design, this a way to find a doctor on Facebook, then the first thing that should be in your mind is like, why, right? Why would Facebook be interested in this? First of all, imagine that this is your product, you are like the CEO, and you're asking, well, why would I do this? What's in it for Facebook, first of all? The second is, what's in it for anybody? Why would anybody come to Facebook to actually look for a doctor, right? And so by asking that question, and then you start thinking out loud, okay, first of all, let me ask you, the interviewer, why. They may tell you something about it, and that will help you narrow down the scope, right? If they don't, then you can start thinking out loud. They want to see your thinking process and whether you can actually think very logically, right? And look at the business in context. And look, so that's the first thing, right, that we're going to do. And then once you sort of like scope it down a little bit, you start from the top, scope it down. Now you start thinking about, okay, the design, right? So in order to design anything, you need to know the users, right? You need to understand who is the type of person that would need a solution for this, right? And the next thing would be finding the needs. Find a segment, the best segment, finding the needs of these segments. Maybe they have common needs, and you need to actually group them in a bigger segment. Or maybe there's a segment that actually has the biggest needs and whose needs can be satisfied better by a Facebook solution, right? So you have to think very clearly and express why to the user, why you're thinking that way, right? And then you come up with the needs, and then you start thinking, okay, do I have enough information here in terms of the needs to come up with a solution? Because if you don't, sometimes people, talk about needs that are really very, very high level. And maybe you need to break it down, right? So then you go into break it down into pain points. And then you start thinking, okay, now I have pain points that tell me more concretely what kinds of solutions I can apply to this. And maybe you prioritize certain pain points, right? But you have to say at every single step, why? Why are you using this user segment? Why are you picking it? Then, why are you picking these needs? Then why are you picking these pain points? And then at the end, you say, okay, looking at these pain points, I think this is the pain points we want to solve. This is the problem. Let me come up with solutions, and then I'm going to prioritize. So at the high level, again, is always the scoping down the problem and saying why you're making those choices. And it's always thinking broad, and then you go broad, and then you make some prioritizations, and then you go broad again, you make some prioritizations. It's always like that, breadth and narrow, right? But again, I want to emphasize very clearly that it's not the structure that matters. Actually, it can hurt you if you have to structure, if you are like a machine. It's more about why you're making choices and getting cues from the interviewer. Are you boring the interviewer, right? So if the interviewer is not following you, they lost you, or they think that you are a machine, you're just talking, right? So you have to engage the interviewer. That's really critical. All right, so any questions so far about that? Yeah.
It was good so far.
Yeah. So always keep that in mind. Yeah, I cannot emphasize any more how so important it is that you engage interviewer and that you think you say why all the time, why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
Right?
it's a question here. I
Mhm.
don't know if you will cover this as we proceed, but there could be several type of users and several type of segments.
Mhm.
How do you pick one?
Yeah, we're gonna go through that, right?
Sounds good.
When we look at that, and again, every situation is kind of some problems are similar, but every situation is different, and you need to adjust your thinking, okay, for everything. So now, I talk a lot about frameworks, and frameworks can help you, but those are like just sort of like breadcrumbs, right? And you can pick things about the frameworks that are going to help you, right? So I'm going to put a framework here, but we're going to pick some points from there, maybe not all of them, just to let us, think through, right? But I strongly recommend do not put your points when you answer the question, okay? That killed me because you may give the impression that you are too rehearsed, okay, or too strict to the framework, right? But in general, the points that you want to think that you can touch is first clarify. Why are they asking me this? Clarify what they're asking, right? Then you need to think in, why do Facebook wants to do this? Why do this? Right? Why? And what's in it for the user? Why would user come to Facebook? The other thing is now, once you establish that, then you start thinking, okay, you may want to use this to narrow down the scope. And now you start with the design process. And you say, okay, usually for the design, you think about the users. You're going to think about, what are use cases, scenarios. And then maybe you're going to think about needs within those use cases. Finally, you're going to pick some of these needs, and then you're going to come up with some solutions, right? And then after that, you're going to prioritize those solutions, right? And you're going to talk about metrics, because that's how, as a product manager, you're always thinking about, okay, how am I going to measure, right, that I'm successful with the solution? So this keep in your head, okay? And then after you do that, you come up with the design, the interviewer is going to ask you follow-up questions, okay? And if you look at the manual, at the PDF that Facebook gives you for your interview, okay, that's the most important document ever, because they tell you exactly what they're looking for, okay? So if you look at the product sense part, they're gonna here they tell you, hey, this is exactly what we're looking for. We're seeing to see how you trade off between different things. Do you think about risks? What are the different metrics that you are going to give to your teams, right? And things like that. So read that document very carefully. Note exactly what they tell you, what they're looking for in the answer, and bring that when you give your answer. Be prepared to either say it or answer the question. If they ask you, well, what would you do if 1% goes up and another one goes down into this? What are the trade-offs, etc. Make sense? All right. So let's start with the question here. And again, as I said, forget about putting the framework here. Just think. We're going to start thinking. So the question is, design something, a solution for people to find a doctor in Facebook. All right. So if the interviewer is there and they're asking me this question, I think that the first thing that we do is clarify. Now, would love for you guys to participate and tell me what is the first thing that comes to mind for clarifying this question? What is it like open for you?
Yeah, I think the first question for me is like, is Facebook trying to get into this new business of helping people find doctors, like, or is it a standalone separate thing, or will it be part of Facebook, the overall site? Um, and
What?
then, related to that is like, what are they hoping to do with this? Like, are they hoping to get more users, get more engagement on their platform, or find a separate business? That's what I was trying to hint.
Yeah, perfect. These are perfect questions that I would ask, right, to the interviewers. Like, why is Facebook interested in this? What are they hoping to do? And what do you think they would answer?
I think to me is that one, Facebook could say that we want to leverage our current network of 2.8 billion people to kind of like help people do more of a vertical search. So this is an example of a vertical search. They can say like, we feel like there is a value that we can provide. We want to start with doctors because there is a lot of demand for this type of service, or we think there is a demand. We've
Okay, I
seen
think that
this.
you're getting too deep, Himanshu, to this.
Hello,
Yeah,
Malika.
yeah.
Hello?
Hi. I think it also has to do with like a big thing for Facebook is like this idea of wellness and well-being. And I think being able to find a doctor ties in very neatly into that goal that they have for the platform.
Okay. So, Himanshu, you said, okay, so, sorry, this is, Olusei, you're saying wellness. Himanshu, you said that it could be a
Yeah, it's a vertical search.
vertical service. Okay, these are all good questions, right? And you're saying, but I think the key aspect of this is like, why with Facebook, what's the advantage of Facebook, right?
I think they have 2.8 billion people, and they have a very good idea of your network. People go to doctors that you can personally refer to, and this is a very one. It's a local search, and number two, it's a very uh, high value search. I mean, getting a CAC, which is like customer acquisition cost for a doctor, is very high. So if Facebook can help, that would be awesome. And number three is like, you
What
go
do
to
you mean by
doctors.
acquisition costs? For who?
I think for the doctors itself, I think I was leaning on that part. I was saying that for a doctor to find a new client, their acquisition cost is super high, and Facebook could become the marketplace that connects consumers to doctors, and so it can be very valuable there. And number three is like, doctors, lawyers, these are areas whereby people trust a lot what their friends and family say about somebody, rather than what random people say about a doctor.
Okay.
So Facebook is
So
uniquely positioned in that place.
one aspect that I will contend here is that finding a doctor is not like finding a lawyer, right? It's and in terms
Yeah,
of acquisition costs, usually when you think about doctors, you go to a hospital, right? And there's the issue of insurance. You cannot
yeah,
just
yeah,
go
yeah.
to anybody and
That's
all
true.
those
That's true.
things, right?
That's true. That's true.
So I would mention that as a major roadblock,
It's
right?
a roadblock. Yes. Yes.
Um,
Uh,
hello, Malina. So something else I was also thinking about is a big focus for Facebook recently strategically is groups, because they've seen that there's a lot of engagement. And then when people are trying to find a doctor, they reach out to people in their communities. And I'm also guessing that Facebook has probably been using the AI and just search queries and recommendations. And maybe it has seen like lots of queries regarding finding a doctor, or maybe certain groups that they have. And so maybe they've seen a huge opportunity based on like maybe engagement in certain groups, or maybe from their search queries, and maybe they see this
Yeah.
as a way to
yeah,
leverage that.
that's a good one. So overall, I think I would summarize this, from what you guys are saying is like, look, Facebook is a huge network, and the advantage that it has is that for an application like this, to finding a doctor, trust is a big issue, right? And you can trust your friends in your community better than anybody else. So, and I would leave it as that, right? We just want to find a logical reason of why Facebook would be interested in this. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that's a good
Okay.
reason.
And I would also bring, of course, what are the roadblocks, right? Which is, insurance and all the stuff. And then I would go into clarifying even more, right? because there are doctors and there are doctors, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Like there are
what
so
kind-
many different types of
What
doctors.
kind of doctor, right? And they may throw this back at you, right? And say, well, who do you think, right? So how would you guys respond?
I would say like my first response would be maybe more like a general practitioner or a primary care doctor, because I find it like hard pressed to think I'm gonna find like a neurologist, or I would try to search for a urologist or a super specialist there. For one, I don't know if I need that guy. Like I don't even know these specialities. And number two, I don't see Facebook as a natural place for me to go and find a specialist, right?
Yeah. I mean, okay, somebody else has another thing to say?
It could be a doctor for your pets.
Doctor for your pets. You mean veterinarians?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, in the same category,
Right.
I would
So
say like chiropractors, nurse practitioners, or like these kind of categories. And I'm just saying because if you look at
Yeah.
ZocDoc, which is a comparison site,
Yeah.
most of the sites there, these are more like primary care,
Yeah.
first contact health professionals. They're
Yeah.
not like specialists.
Okay, so I think that what we're trying to say here is, look, there are so many doctors out there, but really because when it comes to your health, there are different kinds of doctors, and the ones that you will trust your network to find are probably going to be first contact doctors. It's not going to be like specialty like for cancer and things like that. I mean, there's too much knowledge required for this, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, there's a lot of there's a lot of risk also, right? Would be there for recommending maybe somebody that won't do a good job. So there are certainly those issues, right? The other thing that I would mention is this: look, finding a doctor is a sensitive matter, right? People don't want to say that they're sick.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
So
I don't want
there's
to
a
tell the
lot-
world that I have cancer. Like maybe I don't want my employers to know that.
So there's a privacy issue, right? So we're narrowing the scope here by asking these questions, okay, and explaining, and say, so because of privacy issues and because finding specialty doctors, that's a different area where there needs more information. I think that the best that Facebook can do is focus on first touch primary type of doctors, right?
I wonder if we could also partition the doctors based on the age of the people visiting them, right? So you could say maybe it's pediatric.
Data. Right now we're scoping it down, right? And at this point, it doesn't make sense to actually partition in age because, you want to target a massive number of people, right? You don't want to constrain yourself to a particular age. And so we're just narrowing down the scope to see what kind of doctor, right? So if we come up with first touch primary doctors, there are different kinds, right? I mean, Himanshu, you mentioned chiropractors, right?
Yeah, chiropractors, yoga instructors. I'm just saying like even those guys could be qualified as like, like life coaching.
I'm thinking also dentists, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Dentists, like very easy.
Dentists. The other thing that I would ask is, look, there's also doctors mental health, right? But I would scratch mental health because of the
we can scratch mental health, but we could say like life coaching and all is very accepted socially today. And even like more like primary care or those type of doctors, nurse practitioners. And I think a little bit of the I don't want to overdo it, but a little bit of the local aspect, like somebody who's close by, somebody who's near me, could be fine. Or somebody who can do this.
Let's not go too narrow there. Okay. Then somebody mentioned veterinarians. I think that's a good point. I would ask it at the beginning. Also here, it's like, okay, are we talking about doctors for people? Could we also talk about doctors for, animals, right? Veterinarians. So I would bring that up, right? So
because I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it too early to even ask something like, am I finding the doctor for myself or on behalf of somebody else? Is that too early to ask that question?
Yeah, let's do that when we look at the users, okay? At the user segmentation. Okay, because that's part of the personas. All right, so I think we have narrowed it down to first touch doctors. I would say probably let's focus on human doctors. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you can certainly go into the pet doctors, right? But I think that is a way to cop out with the problem, right? Because they're not, even with first touch doctors, there's a little bit of privacy things there. All right. So let's say this is this first touch.
One other clarifying question. What is it that we want to achieve? Do we just want to find a doctor, or do we want to book appointments? Like in the entire journey that we have with doctors, where do we focus?
Yeah, that's
later.
That is a good question, but that is a good question. Do we want to find I mean something else? Although it is encroaching a little bit into the needs, which we haven't talked about. Yeah. So I think that at this point I will leave it. I will just perhaps mention it, right? But I will not go too deep, right? Okay. So you can say, hey, looks like we just want to find a doctor, but is there something else more in mind going into scheduling? And they might say, well, you tell us, okay? They might say that, okay? All right. So then, once you make this decision, you say, okay, let me repeat, or let me summarize, basically what I have decided, okay? And so that brings it back to the interviewer. Make sure that you explain to him clearly that you have made a decision. The decision why I'm going to choose, primary first touch doctors is because there's lower risk of impinging on privacy issues, and this is the type of doctor where you can ask your friends, your community, they'll be very happy to suggest to you. So there's an element of the social aspects, that clearly Facebook has an advantage of. It's a better position than other competitors, than everybody in the space. So now you sort of give a reason, right? And that's what they want to hear. Any questions so far?
I think this is good.
Okay. So now that we've done that, then you say, all right, now what's in it for the user specifically? Why can't they go to Yelp?
Yeah, I think that's a very open and fair question. Like, why can't they go to Yelp? There are all the reviews there. Why can't they go to ZocDoc or just a Google search?
Yeah.
I think if I were asked that question, I would say trust is important. Like if I see my friend give a review for a doctor on Facebook or wherever, I would trust that more than a random person. And number two is like, I don't know if this is valuable, but a little bit of the local aspect. I just feel like maybe Facebook knows who's around me right now. Like Yelp also tries to do that, but maybe the local search is not that great. But I don't know if that's a strong point.
I don't think that's a strong point. I think that the point that Oluseyi brought is probably strong, which is community, and now Facebook is focusing a lot more on community. Yeah. And when it comes to community in your neighborhood, right, I think that you trust those people more. Yes, so I would say friends and community, right? All right. So we have big reasons of, why this makes sense for Facebook, what's in it for Facebook in terms of the business, more engagement, as Oluseyi said, getting people back into the platform, having that sense of community. What is it for the user? There's more trust in it. So now you start with like, okay, you have scoped it down, you have given reasons why it makes sense. Okay? All right. Having said that, then at this point, then you may say, hey, I would like to narrow this down even more. Okay. Do we need to narrow it down to more, like doctors first touch? first touch doctors because we have chiropractors, dentists, practitioners, or should we leave it general? Maybe we leave it general, right? First touch. What do you think?
I think so. This is my question. I think somebody asked this earlier as well.
Yeah.
Maybe you pointed out the roadblock is the insurance. So I can find any number of doctors, but if they don't work with my insurance,
Right.
or if then it's a very different conversation. Then I don't know, even if I search somebody and I call them and they say the insurance doesn't work, then it's a useless search.
Yeah, that's
So
a very good point. That's a very good point. So maybe because of that, right?
yeah,
What would be the decision that we make? Well, then I will. This is tricky, right? Because you want to provide something useful.
yeah.
Uh,
I would say then basically, I'm not trying to jump ahead, but I would say this is for services that may or may not be covered by insurance, but people
yeah,
would still avail. And
yeah,
number two, this is for people who don't care about insurance. Maybe they are uninsured, right? Or or else they have such good insurance that any that they don't care about the cost. So then those are the two segments that would look for such things.
yeah.
Hello, Melina. So I think another potential roadblock could be, what if I'm looking for a doctor and there's a language barrier? How do I communicate with that doctor?
Mhm.
Yep. Yep.
English, for example.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, I think that honestly, that would be more. I would say that could be part also of the needs, right? We're providing the solution.
Okay.
So it's a good point, right? But I think let's think that when we go and look at the needs. Okay.
Yeah. Then the other thing I would also say is that I know this is a very US centric thing in the terms of insurance and such. In other countries, at least say India and such, because insurance doesn't play such a big part, actually finding a doctor is a very practical starting point in the sense that people, because they don't have any insurance or the insurance doesn't cover doctors the way it does in US, they are actually looking for a starting point and they pay out of pocket. So it's
Got it.
it's completely fine in many countries.
So this is sort of like it touches other countries, right? It encompasses
Yep.
other countries besides the US.
Yep.
That's very good because we want to find a solution, obviously, that is not only for the US but around the world.
Yeah, in Canada as well, you just have free healthcare, so it's just a matter of like finding a doctor. It doesn't really matter about insurance or payment or anything like that.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Great. So we have narrowed it down then to situations in the United States where there's no insurance needed. In other countries, they don't have insurance. It's okay to find a doctor. All right. Very well. Except here, we also have that situation though. Now that I think you brought that. In the US, you can only find, it would be only for finding first touch doctors or things that, no risk, right? I mean, no insurance, right? But for other countries, right, you actually can find real doctors. It's kind of like a different situation, right?
Yep.
Tricky. I mean, I would point that out and I would say, hey, you know what, to start with, I'm going to start with a common thing that they have, which is just services where there's no insurance needed in the United States and also not in those countries.
Yep.
Okay. Very well. So now let's start thinking about, having said that, now I want to start thinking about the design of this thing, right? And let's talk, where are we going to do this? Let's do this for the US because it's the country with the most stringent needs, or should we start somewhere else? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one. We can start with the US, I feel. And the reason being, I mean, going back to some of the other comments people had, I mean, the type of users who are on Facebook are still, millennials and people who may not have great coverage by itself. The US healthcare market is so screwed up that there is a need for, bringing good solutions to it. So it's monetizable. That's what I meant. The CACs are super high here still. and I think it's a good test bed for us to try this out here.
Other opinions?
Yeah, I think the US is a good idea as well, just because we're all like kind of more or less familiar with it, and it's something like maybe the interview and you would be familiar with, and you should probably pick the option that you know the most.
Yeah, but that is not a good reason, right?
We should caveat it with the fact that when we solve for it, we will take the insurance aspect into consideration, right? And then go ahead with it, right?
I'm sorry,
So
can
that
I
should be
repeat
good.
that?
Yes, I was saying we could pick the US, but also add this caveat that considering the insurance is an important factor which should be present in our design, right? So pick it,
No,
but
because
also specify.
we already made that decision that we're going to do that, and the reason for that is because it is so. There are several reasons, right? We said first is a major roadblock.
I mean,
right?
pick
Because
the
the
US,
insurance-
pick the
I'm
US
sorry.
and give. So we could pick the US and give and say that we will solve for the insurance issue,
I wouldn't.
right?
I wouldn't do that because it is a very what's the right word, right? It's a very tricky issue with the insurance, right? You will have to manage the system so that you integrate with all those insurances to make sure that the person is covered, right? And then look at the doctors networks that they have there. I just don't see Facebook doing that.
I might give this answer, Milena. If they're looking, depends on the goal of this feature. If they're trying to make higher revenue per user, higher ARPU, right? Then in US, yes, there are 300 million people, but the number of uninsured is less. But per individual, they can actually make a lot more ARPU and a good revenue, right? However, if their goal is more users, like higher coverage, then maybe they go to places like India or Canada or Europe.
Wait. But how do you think? Facebook makes money based on advertisements, right? It's not. It's not on anything else. So what they're looking for is for people to be more engaged on the platform, come back, so that they can show them ads related, even related to their health, right?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The average, if you look at Facebook's 10K itself, they also say that the value of a Facebook user in US is almost 10 times than the value of a Facebook user in India. Right?
Uh-huh.
So what I'm trying to say here is that if I'm valued at around $25 to Facebook per year, if they start a business for uninsured people in US, their average revenue per user by showing them more ads or more engagement would be much higher, much quicker, right?
Yeah.
Versus them going to India, whereby the
Got it.
value of
And
one user is $2. Yeah.
And that's a good point. And it's not only the uninsured; it could be the insured, but they just want to pay.
Yeah,
for it, right?
exactly. The
Melina,
insured
sorry,
is who just. Yeah.
I have a point to make. So your question was like, why are we focusing on North America? And I think when we're trying to answer that question, I think a good way of looking at it is what is it about using Facebook as a solution that we wouldn't be able to do without Facebook, given a lot of the constraints that we spoke about, like uninsured, lack of insurance. And I think being able to articulate the fact that because Facebook, you're basically crowdsourcing stuff from different, like a large pool of audiences, Facebook will actually allow you to sort of walk around those constraints than if you had done it by yourself. So I think being able to articulate how Facebook helps you walk around the constraints that people typically find because it's a crowdsourced platform can help.
What kind of constraints?
So like, for example, we talked about when you're trying to find a doctor, things around like you don't have insurance, those different things. And whereas if you're on Facebook, because you have so many people on the platform, it might be easier to get information. It might be easier to actually address a lot of the constraints that people come up against when they're trying to find a doctor. So that might be one way of articulating why North America. I don't know, it's just an idea.
Yeah, I think that actually. So I think if I'm trying to understand what you just say, Olusijeki, is I think you're saying. I think what you're saying is like, look, there are people here on the platform, and in the United States, which they don't have insurance, maybe they need help with that, with the network or the community can help them with that information on who to get. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so basically what I'm saying is that there's so many, the reason why they would want to go on Facebook is because Facebook will be better able to help them solve that problem than if they're done it by themselves in the real world. Like, it's actually the constraint that makes Facebook a much more attractive option.
But the only reason why Facebook would be a more attractive option is because you trust your community more.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right? And combine that with what Himanshu just said, which is the ARPU of Americans is much higher than anybody else in Facebook, that makes sense.
Okay.
I think that's the motivation to start in North America. I think that, so if we use North America, I think it's ARPU, plus, community. Well, generally it's community, right? But it's ARPU would be the reason why I would do it. Because there's business to be made, right? Okay, have we established that?
I think another argument can be made that, US, the health facilities are still better. In Asia Pacific, for instance, there are more instances of people getting diseases or getting sick. So there's a larger population that can be addressed, and there are more cases. So volume-wise and more, I would say, ethics-wise, it might make sense to address a market where there is a bigger need.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, because if you want to be socially conscious, I actually will go to Africa and try to help people there.
Which could be true, right?
Mm.
Right. That's one perspective.
No, I see the argument. I think like if you go to, basically if you look at the TAM for a service which helps you find a doctor, it may be more in emerging markets and such. But the problem is, if your goal is monetization, then it's a different goal. Like, but if your goal is coverage of more people or becoming the de facto service to become search doctors or other things, those markets could be more attractive.
Yeah. But we didn't talk about the goal, right? We didn't talk about the goal yet.
Well, the objective for, at the high level, the objective of Facebook, what is it, right? I mean, that's a good point, right? And we discussed it at the beginning a little bit. What's in it for Facebook? Well, increase engagement, of the users on the platform, because health is such a big issue for people. Now we're not treating big health, we're treating just first touch. So, but still, there seems to be, a good demand for that, right? And that's going to increase the engagement and connectivity, community feeling of people on the platform, right? I think that's the goal overall. Now, what problem are we going to solve, and how we're going to solve it? We have to go deeper into that. So let's do that. What would be the goal of this product, right? All right. So, yeah.
Sorry, just another question. Could we not have asked that question? Could we not have clarified that in the interview as well?
Yeah, I agree.
Is there a specific model to focus on?
Yeah, you can ask that. Definitely, that would be a good question to ask. And I think Beam brought it at the beginning, which is, hey, are we going to focus on just finding, or is there something else, right? The doctor. And I think most likely they're going to send it back to you, okay? They're not going to tell you why, what's the goal. Maybe they want you to say, hey, they're going to say, hey, why don't you explore, and tell us. Does that make sense? All right. Okay, so let's start with the design, right? So what are we doing? And now when you scope it down and you say, okay, now we have scoping down to first touch, we're going to do this in the USA because there's more ARPU, more for the users. Later on, it can be expanded to other countries, but let's start here in the USA. Now I want to start with the design process. At that point, now you start saying, this is how I think about designing this, right? And I'm not going to write the points here. You just say it, right? You just say it and say, hey, I want to start looking at who the users are, then look at, who the users are, then pick out the user segmentation that makes more sense, for their need, people that want to find, first touch doctors. And then afterwards, I'm gonna look at their needs and then try to come up with some solutions for the needs that I'm going to prioritize. And finally, pick the best solution for it. And then we can talk about metrics, just like a general structure, right? Because then the interviewer knows that you know what you're doing, right? All right, so let's talk about users. So when we think about users, we have to think about the people that come to Facebook, right, that are already on the platform. And, what are their needs with regards to finding, these kinds of doctors which are not covered by the insurance, right? So who are those users?
Yeah, one category I would say is like, millennials who are looking for general, wellness. So their desire starts more from wellness and fitness, and or else a little bit in, both physical and mental wellness. And they're kind of like, it's the first maybe doctor or medical service that they're trying to find themselves.
Yeah.
So that's one user segment and a need. That, hey, I want to be healthy, I want to do this. I may be looking for a nutritionist to help me, or like maybe looking for a life coach to help me.
Okay.
Less of an incident driven. Like the second could be, people who, I don't know, move to a new area, want to get suggestions on doctors in this new area, because every time you move, you have to find a new set of doctors and dentists and other things. So smaller use case, but still a use case, because, a lot of people get new jobs in new cities, or students who move. So that kind of a use case.
Someone who's just kind of wanting to switch from their current provider in their
right. Current providers, yes.
So maybe to his point, maybe like a recent college graduate.
I'm sorry?
Just to jump off of what he just said, like maybe a recent college graduate moving to a new city and is trying to find a doctor for the first time because they've been on their parents' health plan all this while.
Exactly.
Okay, so let me just give my opinion here, a little bit of the segmentation, right? Usually when you want to come up with a segmentation, right, it has to be across an attribute that is common, okay? So here we're combining basically age with events that happen to people, okay? Which is either moving to a new area, switch from providers, recent college graduates, and that's not good. So we need to think in a different way. And I think that and these are good things to think about, but maybe there's a combination there, a new attribute that we need to come up with, which is, we talk about this need for doctors that are not going to be specialists, right? They're just doctors that are for things that are simple, that you have, right? So I think that a way to think about it is like, who, when, and how, who and when do people think about, if you go to the chiropractor, all right, what, that maybe you had an event, you had an injury, or you need to go to the dentist, or, that's more a maintenance thing, right? Now, as you people say, there are events in life that happen, right? You move to a new place, or you just graduated, but those events trigger for you to look for a new doctor or something like that, right? But I don't think that segments the need. The need is the same, right? So is there a way that we can segment these users in terms of different needs, right?
Yeah.
Not in terms of events, but in terms of the different needs to find a first touch doctor. So maybe the need would be, okay, let's pick just one case, okay? Let's say a chiropractor, right? So instead of going to Yelp or whatever, what would be my thinking in terms of going to Facebook to find a chiropractor? Maybe it's like, hey, I need to find somebody. I cannot walk, right? I need to find somebody that's really close by in the community. Okay, so maybe that's a need in terms of finding somebody that is part of your community, right? Your local community. Is there a different need? Maybe there's somebody that I don't know. I'm trying to think.
Convenience.
Yes, but convenience is too big of a word. Let's break it down. Right?
Melinda, in terms of like possible users, what about like say a mother for her child, or maybe someone that's immobile and needs a doctor to come to them?
Is there a lot of that?
No.
I would also say, like, because healthcare costs are so opaque or non-transparent, there could be a need for people to see somebody at a lower cost, or like somebody, yes, who's close by, but also is, doesn't cost an arm and a leg. So that could be a need. I just want to see somebody that I can, find my budget. I'm going to pay it from my pocket.
Okay, somebody that is into, somebody said convenience, and we can say that lives in the community. What else is about convenience there? What is there about convenience? There's somebody lives close. What else is convenient? Maybe easy to.
I think even like somebody mentioned, like the language piece, like I see that as a convenience as well. If I'm bilingual, I want to talk in my language. If it's a female, I have a female issue, I want to talk to a female.
This is the convenience use. Okay, and then there is. Huh?
Are we? Sorry, this is Shipra here. I joined a bit late, but just quick question for my understanding. Are we only looking at uninsured? Is that something we've and not the insured? Because
mostly uninsured, because it doesn't involve the roadblock of insurances and all the stuff, right? So okay, going into the segmentation, we talk about the convenience user. Himanshu, you talk about the low budget user.
Yeah, low budget user. And then also, I was mentioning, like, if they speak the same language, if they are a female and I'm a female, I want to just talk to women about my personal issues. So
I would say same language, or maybe same, not only language, but I would say more than language. You know what? I think it's culture, right?
Yeah, culture, gender, because those things people do care about.
Are we not talking about?
One thing I want to say is that if we are looking for a doctor, I think the one criteria, whether you're insured, non-insured, low budget, high budget, I think the most important criteria that anybody would look for, in my mind, is how good is that doctor? Like how good are they at what they do?
Yeah, but we're segmenting. You're talking about needs, right? And that's a need of everybody, right? You don't want to go to a bad doctor. So I think that's a requirement. That's not a. We're trying to segment the users.
I see. Okay.
Right?
Got it.
Okay. So we're trying to use a segmentation criteria that basically makes the segments messy, mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, right?
I think how does convenience make the segmentation, right? Because convenience is also, again, then a requirement. Convenience doesn't separate the needs of the people.
Well, there's somebody that would prefer low budget.
Yeah,
go 30 miles to see the doctor.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, that is easy to me, because these things could be opposite.
Right. So people pay a lot of money for convenience, right? But somebody that doesn't have much money, they have to do this trade-off, right?
So when we're talking about users, are we talking about the one side of the market? Because there's the other side of the market as well, right? Doctors would be users as well for Facebook.
That's a good point, right? So we're talking here about, we should have done that segmentation at the beginning, but these are like the end users, right? Sort of like the patients, so to speak. And then there's the doctors, right?
I think for the patients, there is also segmentation that people have an emergency case, or they go to doctors regularly for preventive case.
For an emergency, they wouldn't log on to Facebook to find a doctor.
First touch doctors, we already made that determination. So
Yeah.
when it's not a real emergency, right? So that's why we went through the first part, to start narrowing down the scope.
Okay.
So let's not go back to that, because that mixes up things. What were you saying, Bin?
Because Kanav, I was saying the same thing, that for an emergency, you wouldn't log on to Facebook to find a doctor.
Yeah, and we already exclude that.
Yeah.
So are we trying to segment based on needs? I thought like we go first determine personas, then we're going to talk about needs. But these seems like needs.
You're trying to segment. I wouldn't call it needs. I would segment based on your preferences, right? These are preferences, so to speak. That's the way
I think we can call them personas. We can say there is a low cost budget, user, or there is a convenience lover, right? We can start giving them names, right? Or
it doesn't matter if you give them names or not. But I think who just mentioned that? Kunal?
Yeah. My question is like, it seems like we are first determining the needs, and based on that, we are coming with personas.
No. This is segmentation based on preferences. Okay. So basically, somebody prefers convenience over money, right? How much it costs. Or maybe somebody prefers,
I think,
no value or convenience.
Yeah, I mean, preferences, needs, they are, I think, kind of the same, right? What my preference is, my need.
No, well, I wouldn't call it needs, because we're going to go into, let's say we're going to go into convenience, right? And if we go into the convenience person, and now we want to look at their needs, right? And they're going to put a lot of needs there that are related to convenience. Maybe my need is that the person, is very close by. Maybe my need is that their locale is super posh. Maybe my need is that they can come to my home, like somebody said, right?
And their preference would be something like, I would rather see them on Tuesday versus Wednesday or something like that, right?
That's very specific.
Right.
Anyways, I don't know. I think that to me it's sort of like, when you're talking about the users, is like the way to segment is relative to the solution that you are providing. What are sort of like their big preferences for these users? How would they use your solution, right?
Or what are they looking to accomplish?
And so that's the way I'm thinking.
So like, I think what I have used in the past is, what are they trying to accomplish?
What are they trying to accomplish? Why not? I mean, there are different questions that you can ask, right? I think at the end of the line, what you're really trying to do is to come up with a segmentation where you can go deeper into use cases that they are different, right?
Hey, Melina. So actually, I had a question. How come we didn't start with personas like maybe a mother for her child, an immigrant, an elderly person, a single mother, a disabled person, and then based on that, then look at their needs, their behaviors, their pain points?
Because, okay, so if you're thinking about that, why is it the fact that they're single mothers or have children or whatever? That is very specific, right? I think it wouldn't cover men or other kinds of
I see.
research, right? So I think that you will be pigeonholing yourself.
I see.
Right? There will be very small segmentation there.
Okay.
Whereas this one covers everybody, right?
One other thing that I could suggest is, one other way to segment, and I don't know if segmentation is the right word, is let's assume that half of the population is on Facebook. So let's not, try to find the single mothers and the Spanish-speaking people, but not. These are like little, segments of the overall population. Like Facebook represents general population, right, at this point. So it's not only for millennials. It's not only for old people.
Yeah. So we're trying to cover all that.
Yeah. So, but what I'm saying is this. So, what if we say there are there is a solution that Facebook is trying to build. There are things what we are calling like jobs to be done. Like there are things that this solution, there are jobs to be done by users, and we're trying to find what are those things that really would appeal to users. Let's not even call them needs at this point. Let's not call them segments. And then say, okay, who are the people who would naturally gravitate to those jobs to be done more than other people, so that the segments that come out are unique and hopefully niche. For example, there are people, job to be done here is find me a cheap doctor who lives close by, right? Another job to be done is find me a doctor who speaks my language, knows my culture, and I can be comfortable to talk to. So that's what I'm thinking. Like if we frame it that way, maybe I don't know. I'm asking the group, is that better?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to to sort of frame it. You know, what is the job that these people want to get done,
Right.
right? And that's a very good way to do it. Actually, you know, jobs to be done, and then this makes sense, right? Some people want to, you know, have convenience. They want to get the job done quickly. Some people want to, you know, have a low
Yeah.
assumptions. Some people
Yeah.
just want to stay within the culture and feel comfortable, right?
Yeah.
So that's a very good way to put it.
Yeah.
Just to be done. Very nice. All right. So we're just here, and so
So just one thought here. I have a feeling. I think it makes sense. Although I have a feeling that will actually find it very difficult to segregate people into segments based on this criteria. Because how would you segregate people saying these people care about culture, but they are willing to pay, you know, enormous amount of money? I don't think we'll find people who will clearly fall into that category, if you know what I mean. Like for people, all of these criteria are important. If you give them a choice, they'll tell you that, hey, yes, I want a very economical doctor who's highly rated, who lives close by, who is from my culture. I mean, they want all of that criteria to be fulfilled, and they'll try to optimize all of that criteria. And
Well,
when
I think that the way we're seeing this is that, you know, these people, what is the most important job that they want to get done, okay? And I would disagree with you that people are looking to optimize on all angles, right? Saying like the best doctor with the lowest budget. No, I think that people in general, you know, especially people that are rich, they could care less how much it costs, right? Why would they care, right? Or like people that, you know, really they only have a few, you know, they don't have much money, right?
but who would be willing to go? Like who would be? I guess I'm still struggling with that thought, because who would say that I'm willing to drive 50 miles to get a doctor, who's a little above my, who's within my budget, but then I'm not willing to drive 25 miles to, go for a doctor who's just a little above my budget. Like, how do you think that people in real life, like, how would you find people making those decisions, and, in turn, helping us segment them into those categories? You know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's hard to get people to just pick one of these categories, because they will try to optimize, and maybe they'll compromise a little bit on each one of these needs, depending on, what their overall, I don't know, situation is.
Mm.
I'm just saying, like, I'm finding it a little hard to see people, like, in real life fall clearly into these segments that we are defining, because I feel that all of these criteria they may not be equally important, but they all have some weightage. And so it's going to be very hard for us to say that, oh, I'm just, either we target everyone by income level, so that's fine. Then you say that I'm catering to this income level and that income level, and that's more discrete. Then you can easily segment people into various income groups. That's perfectly fine. Or you just segment people based on how far do they, maybe people are looking for doctors within a radius of 10 miles, 25 miles, 50 miles. That is a clear cut category possible. But I'm finding it hard to mix and match the criteria and saying that we find people who are only looking for, economical doctors, or only looking for doctors close by, because I think
Hey, Shupra, I think what you can do is you can maybe propose to us, like, what would be your segmentation? Like, I hear your point of view.
So guys, it's 8:06. So why don't we take this off and, Chipra, if you can come up with a segmentation that you think makes sense, propose it. And then next time we can finish this question, next week, because
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to derail the discussion, but I'm just like sharing my thoughts.
Yeah, sure.
Definitely.
For me, for me, it's clear, but I think that maybe for a lot of people it's not. So let's continue this discussion next time. But please send me your ideas of what segmentations you think would be good.
Okay. Yeah.
Sound good?
Sure.
All right,
yeah,
guys.
definitely.
So let's
Thank you.
continue next week.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.